This is TechKnow, a show about innovations that can change lives.
The science of fighting a wildfire.
We're going to explore the intersection of hardware and humanity, and we're doing it in a unique way. This is a show about science by scientists. Let's check out our team of hardcore nerds. Costa Gramatis is an engineer who's designed everything from bionic eyes to space satellites. Tonight, we're in the OR for what could be a life-changing moment.
We're literally like hours away from your surgery, right?
Yes.
How long have you been waiting for the surgery?
Lisa hasn't been able to see for decades. Now, she's about to get fitted with an amazing technology. Will it work? The real-life drama.
And you tell us when and if you see anything.
I'm seeing flashes.
Oh, you are?
Marita Davison is a biologist specializing in ecology and evolution. Tonight, it may look like aliens, but this is real.
So this adult is basically chewing its way out of a carcass.
Insects battle it out, and the health of California's orange crop is at stake. And I'm Phil Torres, I'm an entomologist. Tonight, the great white shark makes a comeback. That's our team, now let's do some science.
Hey guys, and welcome to TechKnow. I'm Phil Torres, joined today by Marita Davison, Costa Gramatis. Costa, you have very impressively designed bionic eyes yourself. And in this story, you got to look at one of the most advanced versions of it out there.
You want to talk about changing the world and huge innovation in science technology. We're talking about restoring vision for the blind. This brand new technology recently approved by the FDA, we got to go see it being installed in a patient. It's amazing stuff. Let's check it out. In a few minutes, patient Lisa Kulik will undergo an innovative surgical procedure. It will take her from darkness to eventually seeing shapes, outlines, and partial images. And we're literally like hours away from your surgery, right?
Yes.
How long have you been waiting for the surgery?
Probably a year and a half.
A year and a half?
Yeah. Since I'd heard about it and then trying to get through all the processes and approvals, and can't believe it's finally here.
Lisa has retinal pigmentosa, an inherited degenerative eye disease. Retinal pigmentosa causes the retina to atrophy. Sight loss can run the gamut, from severe to complete blindness.
I see shadows, sometimes silhouettes depending on the light in the room. It was gradual since probably my mid-20s. Probably in the last 7 to 10 years, it's been where I couldn't get around on my own.
Dr. Lisa Olmos-Deku will perform the surgery, just the third in the US, and the first at Keck Medicine at the University of Southern California.
I met Lisa for the first time about 1 year ago, and I knew right away that she was really an excellent candidate. She is a person who has profound vision loss from retinitis pigmentosa, but has not let that keep her spirit down. She is extremely positive, hardworking. She faces each challenge with a lot of energy. And this is exactly the kind of person who will benefit the most from this device.
The device is called the Argus 2. Dr. Mark Humayun pioneered the technology behind it.
You need to have at least 10% of your optic nerve intact because it needs the optic nerve to send the information to the brain. So if your optic nerve is completely cut or completely destroyed, then this sort of device doesn't work. But there are millions of people around the world who have enough optic nerve function that we can put the device into the eye. So it's very exciting to be able to do that.
During the surgery, a tiny device is implanted directly onto the retina. The device is made up of 60 electrodes.
So the portion that sits on the outer wall of the eye needs to be slipped behind the eye muscles and sewed on the surface of the eye, firmly in place at a precise location, so that the array sits perfectly on the center of the retina and can stimulate the right part of the retina.
So imagine it as a Band-Aid, a very sophisticated Band-Aid that's laying on top of the retina. which allows them to stimulate the neurons underneath.
It's a delicate operation that takes roughly 4 hours, as doctors must use exact measurement and placement. The electrodes are tested before Dr. Omosteku carefully seals the eye back up to prevent leakage. After a week of healing, patients like Lisa are fitted with a pair of glasses. The glasses have a tiny camera fixed to the front of them. The camera on the glasses streams images in real time. The signals are then sent to a wireless transmitter. The transmitter relays those signals to the sensors implanted on the retina. The sensors stimulate the retina with electric impulses. The impulses then send messages to the visual cortex portion of the brain. Even after Lisa receives the Argus II system, it will take weeks before she can make out blurry outlines of images. Why? Because her brain's visual cortex hasn't been used in years and will need to rewire itself.
A lot of these patients haven't seen for decades, often 30 years, 40, and one of my earlier patients hadn't seen for 50 years. So you have to start with the stimulation and getting the brain to be able to interpret those signals and start to understand and start to be able to use and see again. So that period takes a while, the relearning.
Okay, here we are a week after your surgery, and the eye looks really very good.
Lisa is going in for her first tune-up after her implant surgery.
And you can put those on.
Each electrode will be stimulated individually and the signal strength tweaked for comfort. There's also a very good chance that for the first time in more than a decade, Lisa will see something. What does the patient experience?
They initially see spots of light, electrical stimulation, tiny spots of light. Then over a period of time, they're able to put those spots of lights together to create and look at forms.
And you tell us when and if you see anything.
I'm seeing flashes.
Oh, you are?
Flashes of lines flashing.
Great.
And little dots, white.
How big are these dots?
They're probably pinhole size, but the lines are probably maybe like a fingernail length, but they're going side to side like
Oh, that's perfect.
across.
That's perfect. That's exactly what we're trying to do with this. That's great. She's way ahead of schedule. We're very excited about this. All the electrodes are working on this device, and she's already seeing. So this is great. It's a fantastic result for only being 1 week out.
It's exciting. I'm really excited. I can't wait to get to use it more and get more results out of it.
It's like learning how to walk.
I kind of akin it to seeing a baby first learn how to crawl and then walk and run. Literally, the brain is relearning how it sees again with this implant.
For patients like Lisa, it's a leap towards greater independence.
At home, I'm okay. I know my house, but if we're out somewhere, I'd like to just be able to walk without hanging on to somebody.
2 weeks after surgery, Lisa's husband sent TechKnow these pictures of her walking outside. Notice, she isn't hanging on to anyone.
Costa, that was absolutely incredible, but I gotta ask, how is Lisa doing?
Lisa's doing really well. Full recovery. They've turned it on and she's seeing stars, but you have to remember, she has to relearn how to see again. It doesn't just turn on and a switch and you can see everything again. It's a whole new type of sensory input. So her brain has to rewire itself in order to process the data that's coming in through her eye.
I really think that was probably the most fascinating part of the story to me. It's not just an on-off switch. Your brain really has to rewire and reprocess that input of vision.
When you think of a retinal implant that it sits on top of your retina, the signals that they pass through, little electrical signals, have to be shaped and formed in a certain way that your brain will understand it. They haven't figured out how to totally recreate what your retinal cells, the electrical signals that they create, they haven't figured out how to recreate those perfectly. So you're literally getting a whole new kind of sensory input. It's like a different sense almost, even though you can see.
So Costa, by implanting these devices, are they able to actually collect data on how these sensory networks actually are working?
Yeah, they have this entire user base and they're still not entirely sure what the appropriate kind of signal is for each person. Everyone's unique. And as the brain learns and as we watch how their brains rewire themselves to understand what's being put into the eye, we're learning more and more every day about how to create better and more effective bionic eyes.
So this isn't just giving the gift of vision, it's actually learning about how the brain works.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that's really important too, because there's all these different ways to connect to the vision system, and this is just one, but as we learn more, we're uncovering how to talk to the rest of the visual system.
We'll be able to plug into other areas.
Exactly.
Really fascinating piece, Costa. Thanks for sharing your expertise and telling us this story about this incredible new eye. Marita, tell me, are the oranges and the limes and the grapefruits that I love so much in trouble?
Florida's a place where we make a lot of orange juice, and there's a disease there called citrus greening. It's spread by an invasive bug, and it's basically devastating orange groves throughout that state. The jury's still out here in California. The bugs are making their way over here, and biologists here are trying to control the disease with another bug that's a parasite that basically eats the bug that spreads the disease from the inside out. Let's have a look at it.
You wouldn't know it at first glance, but an epic battle of the bugs is taking place on orange trees in Southern California. It's not only a matter of life or death for the insects involved. What's ultimately at stake is the survival of the citrus industry itself.
California is responsible for 80% of the nation's fresh orange market, but scientists are concerned about a disease called citrus greening. It's already decimated thousands of acres of orange groves in Florida and is spread by a tiny bug called the Asian citrus psyllid. But California is placing its hopes on another tiny bug, a parasitic wasp from Pakistan.
This is the Asian citrus psyllid, which can transmit the deadly citrus greening disease when it feeds on the tender young leaves of orange trees.
You can think of an adult Asian citrus psyllid as a flying syringe. It has wings, it can fly from tree to tree. It has this piercing mouth part, which is like a needle. It's full of bacteria. It puts the bacteria into that tree.
Mark Hoddle is an entomologist at the University of California, Riverside. His search for a natural enemy to the Asian citrus psyllid took him to Pakistan.
As a biological control scientist, I go back to the home range of the insect pest. That is the area where it evolved. And we suspect that the home range for Asian citrus psyllid is the Indian subcontinent. We chose an area within Pakistan, the Punjab region. The climate in Punjab has about a 70% climate match to California, which is great for us. So we want our natural enemies to be pre-adapted to California's hot, dry summers, cold, damp winters.
There, in Pakistan, he found a parasitic wasp species called Tamarixia radiata.
So what we've set up here underneath the scope using this camera and the video screen here is we hope to see some of that biology in action today.
So she's essentially laying an egg right now.
That's what she's doing, yep. She's laying the egg right now.
And that egg gets laid, then what happens to that larva?
That egg will hatch, and then the wasp larva will scrape away at the belly of the citrus psyllid nymph.
The parasitic wasp is what's called a parasitoid, meaning it weakens and eventually kills its host.
You can see this female, she's starting to chew that circular hole in the head region of the nymph. Now that nymph shell, even though it's hollowed out, it provides protection for the parasitoid pupa.
So this adult is basically chewing its way out of a carcass.
That's right, an empty carcass. She has the ability to, something like out of The Exorcist, you know, to spin her head around on the top of her thorax, and here she comes now. She's popping out. So this is exactly like the Alien scene, you know, in Alien with Sigourney Weaver. It's, you know, the monster's like popping its way out. It's eaten its host from the inside out, and she's done. Clean herself off, straighten out her wings, get them all straight, and then she'll just take off.
Hoddle says releasing the parasitic wasps would be a natural way of suppressing the psyllid population.
So you're essentially using an introduced species to control another introduced species in this case. Are there any environmental risks associated with that?
Pakistani parasites don't recognize California's native psyllids as food. So should they end up in wilderness areas after they fly out of these citrus orchards, it's very unlikely that they will be able to attack and reproduce on our valuable native psyllids.
The U.S. government agrees. The USDA will spend $1.5 million to scale up breeding and release efforts.
There's some very small wasps. These are the beneficial insects.
David Morgan oversees the mass rearing at the California Department of Food and Agriculture's 7,000 square foot facility.
Well, I basically have an insect factory. We mass produce insects here. In order to do that, we have to grow up the plant that the pest likes to feed on. We then grow up the pest, and then we grow up the beneficial insect on the pest. We then follow that through. We collect up the beneficial insects, and we release them throughout Southern California. So this is a map of LA County. On it, you can actually see an algorithm which was developed by the USDA to evaluate where we should be really looking for the disease.
So basically, this map is telling us where you might expect to see the disease, not where it actually is, right?
We basically look for the hot zones, and we actually release more insects in the higher risk areas and fewer insects in locations where we think there's less likelihood of the insect appearing.
They're initially focusing their release efforts in urban areas where homeowners may be reluctant to use pesticides to control the psyllid population. So the battle to save California's orange trees is on. But it turns out the psyllid has an unexpected ally, another non-native species that could slow down efforts to ramp up the wasp population, the Argentine ant.
Argentine ant is an invasive species and has been present in the United States and California for a long time now.
These ants feast on the sugary waste product of the psyllids and protect them from the parasitic wasps.
So you can see here the ants are already on the colony and they've been harvesting the sugar. All the white sugars have gone now, and bang, our parasite has come in.
Oh, so that's the wasp.
Yeah, so they're already eating one up there. This ant now has caught another female.
These Argentinian ants are eating
exactly,
the wasps.
Right. Part of our education and outreach efforts is going to be educating homeowners on the importance of trying to control these ants.
It's very high drama, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a lot riding on the survivorship of these little parasitoids. All right, you got a few wasps for me, David?
Yeah.
In the meantime, this bug factory aims to produce 1 million wasps for release this year.
See you later.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
So there's ants that are eating the wasps that are eating the psyllids, which have a bacteria that's eating the oranges.
It's very complex.
What's going to get the ants?
Yeah, so I mean, talk about the evolution of, behaviors, these very complex behaviors that happen really fast. Here we've got a plant that was introduced to California, which is typically a desert, right? So we're growing citrus in a desert. We now have a bug that came from Asia that is causing a disease, and we're introducing another bug from Asia to control those bugs. And now there's ants from Argentina that are eating the bugs that are causing the disease. So it's very, very complex.
That's what I love about this concept of almost fighting fire with fire. It's, non-native versus non-native to try to protect our citrus. But scientists have definitely learned that sometimes when you introduce something else new, you think it's going to fix things. It doesn't always go that way.
The scientists in California did extensive testing over a long period of time where they basically were looking at whether the wasps would affect other native insects in the area. And they're saying conclusively that there's no risk of that at all.
I will say it was comforting to see the confidence in which he said it wouldn't happen.
I know.
Because things evolve, and these wasps over maybe 5 generations won't go to a native species, but give them 20 generations, 100 generations in 10 years, and maybe they could all of a sudden just move over to one of the native species.
Ultimately, a lot of people think we're just going to have to develop a line of trees that's resistant to the disease, but that's down the road.
Great. Well, please keep us posted on how it's going, and for now, I'm going to be enjoying my orange juice every day.
It may become scarce. You never know.
Now, Marita, you and I recently had the opportunity to get up close and personal with a creature that most people don't really want to be up close and personal with, sharks. Now, I know both of us walked away from this experience with a love for these beasts, and that's one of the reasons why this next story is some very good news.
Return of the Great White Shark. No, it's not a B-movie title, though conservationists can take credit for the script that's allowing it to happen. A According to a new international study led by the Florida Program for Shark Research, the white shark population off the coast of California is much healthier than previously thought. Researchers estimate that more than 2,000 whites currently call the waters off the Golden State home. A previous benchmark study conducted by Stanford University in 2011 estimated that only 300 or so white sharks were in the same area. As for the why, basically the buffet line has reopened. Scientists involved in the study credit the resurgence to decades of state and federal protection for the fish and marine mammals that the great whites feed on, in addition to bans on fishing the white sharks themselves. Add in similar conservation efforts that have made California's air and water cleaner, and you have the makings of a success story for the ocean's apex predator.
Rita, one of the authors of this paper is Chris Lowe, and he's one of the guys you got to spend some time with.
Yeah, Chris Lowe is a preeminent shark biologist, and he's pioneering research on shark behavior, which is really hard to study, using robots that actually follow these sharks underwater. Very, very cool stuff.
This is going to change how we study animals in the ocean. I believe this is going to change how we do it.
I got to spend a lot of time with him, really trust him. I think he knows his stuff, and he was part of this paper. It's really great news in the world of conservation. We don't get that very often. We don't get success stories that often. Basically saying that sharks are doing better than we thought they were. And that's, in Chris's estimation, thanks to a lot of different factors, but mainly regulation and conservation and activist work over several decades that have really led to a recovery of the population of an apex predator.
It is such a great success, but it's also a lesson that, as you said, it took decades to get to this point and a lot of coordinated effort. So I think it really goes to show that if we want to be conserving these creatures like sharks, we really need to get to work.
How bad was it? How many sharks were there, and how have we fixed this problem?
Well, sharks are very difficult to study. They're mysterious, they live underwater, they're hard to follow, so calculating estimates is always very hard. The fact is that shark populations were not doing very well, and a lot of the rest of the food chain, because sharks are at the very top of that food chain, and so they can really control all of the other things that are happening beneath them. And a lot of the populations of those things were indicating kind of some poor quality in the oceans, and those things are starting to rebound, so it's really good news.
I think what's important to also know with this is one species of shark off one coast, one country with all their conservation efforts. There are a lot of coasts out there and a lot of different species of sharks that are suffering. So this is absolutely great news, but it also goes to show that we need to focus on these other species out there that maybe don't get as much press as something like the great white.
And in fact, there's a little bit of danger too, at least Chris Lowe spoke about this, in having this kind of good news actually stifle further conservation efforts or further funding attempts to continue this research. You know, people might even say, okay, our job's done, let's move on.
To get complacent because problem solved, like we're going home?
Yeah, or go back to business as usual, which, you know, really shouldn't be the way we approach this at all.
So from bionic eyes to the future of my orange juice to great white sharks. I must say here on TechKnow we cover quite the diversity of subjects, and I kind of love them all. It was a really awesome episode, you guys. That's it for now. We'll see you next time here on TechKnow.
Dive deep into these stories and go behind the scenes at aljazeera.com/techknow. Follow our expert contributors on Twitter, Facebook, Google+, and more.